When we look at the classical astrology texts, so much information is about the planets. There's details and details of the planets. A lot of the details given in the planets about the planets are that which they rule. So the sun is the sun is the father, Mars is your siblings, Mars is the general, the sun is the king, the moon is the queen, Mercury is the heir apparent. You know, sun rules wheat, moon rules rice. There's all these things that the planets rule. That's one big body of planetary knowledge. That's important to learn all those details so that you know what planet to look at when you want to predict something. Okay? So that's like one category. The things the planets rule. Okay? But then there's also the natures of the planets, the categories of the planets. And planets are broken into different categories, which means they have a certain nature. It's not something they rule, it's the way that they are. Okay? The most basic nature that everyone learns about at first is the Samya and Krura grahas, which are benefics and malefics. The Sanskrit words used are Samya and Krura. Samya means gentle. Krura means cruel. So basically we have gentle and cruel planets, which modern astrologers call benefics and malefics. I try to use the word gentle and cruel because I think it's a better word for it, and it's the original Sanskrit word, what it means. So that's a very common category. So some planets are gentle, some planets are cruel. So any type of division like that, where it takes the planets and says this planet is like this, these are like this, but these ones are like this, then we're talking about the planet's natures. And there's basically 8 categories given in most classical texts revolving around planets' natures. So the planets fall into, have 8 different types of natures. But then Jaimini adds another one, the second source of strength, which gives a 9th type of nature to planets. Okay? So the first type, and I'm just going in the order that Parashara gives them. A couple of these natures he doesn't give, and I'm tacking those on the end. But most of these natures we find in Brihat Parashara, Horus Shastra, and this is just the order they come in. So, and also I explain all these in detail in my Graha Sutras book. Okay, so if you want to read up more about these natures, you can in that book. But all these natures are important, relevant to Jaimini, and seeing what the sign is going to be like, depending on the planets that are influencing it. First is the Samya and Krura Graha's nature, the gentle and cruel. The Samya gentle planets are the waxing moon, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus. So the waxing moon is the moon when it's from 0 to 180 degrees from the sun. When it's from 180 to 0 degrees from the sun, at that point it's waning. And the waning moon is cruel. Okay? The Krura planets are the waning moon, Mercury when joined with the cruel planet, and not joined with the gentle planet, the Sun, Saturn, Mars, Rahu, and Ketu. Lots of cruel planets. Okay? More cruel planets than gentle planets. So, most things we encounter in life are going to have a lot of cruelty attached to them. So what is cruelty though? Cruelty means difficulties, hardship, and stress. And no doubt on this earth, things are hard. It's hard to get anything done. Everything requires more energy, has more stress attached, and more things go wrong than we imagined. Okay? And those stresses are all indicated by the cruel planets. Okay? When we get something, we have to give something else up, that's a stress. The cruel planets often require that type of sacrifice from us. Okay? But basically, the gentle planets cause concrete experiences that are as comfortable and easy as possible, that work out as simply as possible. The cruel planets cause concrete experiences that have stress, hardship, and work attached to them. And oftentimes, the stress, hardship, and work attached to them is going to be too great so that a person won't want to get involved. They may not want to finish it. They might figure it's not worth it. Because in the end, it's always a matter of, does the amount of work equal the amount of enjoyment out of it. And if it's all work, in the end, it's not going to be worth it. And at the end, you're going to let that thing fall apart. Okay? Now, benefic planets or gentle planets are not necessarily good, and malefic planets are not necessarily bad. I don't like to look at them as good and bad. You want to look at them as the gentle planets allow for ease and harmony, and they make the nature of that thing easy. Cruel planets make the nature of things hard. Okay? But hard does not mean bad. However, it's our nature to take the easy path. You know, people take the easy path. Because the easy path is ultimately the path that lets you live the longest. Because stress, hardship, overwork, fears, anxieties break us down. Right? The cruel planets do that. They cause all these stresses that wear us out over time. Whereas the gentle planets, they give us the things that come easy, that give us a nourishment to them, that help us continue life and live longer. So in the end, we're always going to take the path of least resistance, or the easy path that allows us to have less stress, less hardship, and live longer, versus the hard path, which causes more stress, more hardship, and therefore takes our longevity away. See how that works? So the signs that have the gentle planets influencing are going to be the things that we're going to have more of in our lives and are going to work better simply because they're easier. Okay? Easier things work better. The signs of planets that have, you know, the signs of influenced by cruel planets are going to represent the things that we're going to have less of, because the hard work that it requires and the stress and the hardship it imposes upon us is going to make us do it less. We're just, you know, we can't do as much of it without danger to ourselves. Okay? So it's not that malefic planets are like evil and destroying something like lightning bolts out of the sky, and benefic planets, you know, give you something on a silver platter. You know, and then glue it to you so you can never get rid of it. It's simply that we take the easy path in life. It's our natures. It's everyone's nature to take the easy path. Between eating this and eating this, we're going to eat the food that's on the lowest mountain, right? If we have to climb 5 miles to eat apples and 20 miles to eat passion fruit, we're going to be eating more apples, even if we like passion fruit more, right? Okay? Because if we hike up the mountain every day 20 miles to get our calories of passion fruit, the fatigue from that is going to be so stressful, the amount of fruit we eat at the top of the hill might not even be sufficient to keep us alive. So we're better off going 5 miles to the apples, eating the apples and eating enough that we have plenty of energy left to do everything else we need to do in life. And that's basically the difference between benefics and malefics. It's the amount of work that sign requires for you to have that thing in your life. And cruel planets influence, and it show the amount of work is more than you can keep up without harm to yourself. Gentle planets influence and indicate the amount of work is less than what you get back from it. So you can continue with that thing over a long period of time. Okay? That has nothing to do with what you want, though. Sometimes what you really want, take that because you don't have it probably, takes so much work that, it takes so much work that you, it takes so much work, but you still want it. But it takes so much work that you decide not to have it. But that doesn't mean you don't want it and you're happy, right? And some things might just come so easy, and they might just be in your life so you have them, and they're so good for you, and they really help you and make your life easier, and they nourish you and help you live longer and recover from the hardships of life. Those are the gentle planets. But it might not really be what you even want, and you might just take it for granted, and it might not even make you happy. To see all those qualities, you want it, don't want it, you're happy with it or unhappy with it, we got to look to the Parashar system of astrology. But to simply see it, the concrete fact of the work required results in an expensive energy. Okay? versus the work required results in an addition of energy. Just lets you know how long you can keep it, okay, and not fall apart. So you can kind of look at something like a good example of that is Mars. Mars is a cruel planet. With Mars, you can run 200 meters if you need to, super fast. You can just speed demon it, you know, right out of your house when the house is on fire. But your body's going to, and when you get to the end, you're going to be breathing hard, and then you're going to get the adrenaline shakes, and you're going to have to sit down and almost want to pass out from the stress. Okay? So you had to do that thing, but the amount of stress was huge. But at that point, you had no choice because, you know, it was the better deal than burning to death. But when, you know, it shows that that amount of stress you put into it was very high. And there's not many things where it's worth putting that much stress into, right? Now imagine you can do that for a little while. But what if there was a nuclear bomb that blew up in your city? And let's say you can sprint so fast that you can sprint fast enough to keep ahead of the nuclear radiation. And you're sprinting as fast as you can. The thing is, after 400 meters, you can't sprint that fast anymore. And so the nuclear radiation kills you. And so that's what Rashis and influence by malefics are like. You have enough energy, you could put it into a while and make it work for a while. But eventually you just have to slow down or else you're going to blow a gasket. Your heart can't handle it, you're out of breath. You know, like to the sprinting race, you've got so much lactic acid in your muscles become crippled and you can't run another step. That's what cruel planets are like. Okay? It's not that they're bad or evil, they just represent stresses that are so high we don't get enough time to recover from them. Whereas the gentle planets give things in a way that the stress to get those things is so little that the nourishment we get from those things will be more than the expense to have those things. Because again, everything in life is a choice. Everything we have is a choice. And one of the big factors is the concrete reality of how much do I have to pay for this? And malefics make the payment very high, that we only can sustain it for a short while. Benefics, gentle planets, make the payment low, so we can comfortably afford it. In the end, we only can have in our lives, we only can keep in our lives what we can afford. Right? Otherwise, the bank's going to come and take your home away, symbolically speaking. So those are the qualities that gentle and cruel planets give to the signs. And, you know, in a very concrete way. Now, I have another video, an older video, where I talk more in detail about the gentle and cruel planet. So I would suggest you listen to that, and there'll be a link under this video that you can go catch that video real quick, okay? The second quality that's important, relevant to planets, where they divide into qualities, are masculine, feminine, and neuter grahas. I cover this in depth in Graha Sutras, chapter 9. So the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter are masculine. The Moon, Venus, and Rahu are feminine. Mercury, Saturn, and Ketu are neuters. Okay? Now, masculine grahas get involved in the concrete experiences of the sign for the sake of external fulfillment, meaning to create a better life in the world. They get involved with something because they want to do something with that. They want to build something. They want to make something. Okay? That's why the masculine planets get involved with something. The feminine planets get involved in concrete experience for the purpose of internal fulfillment, to create a more satisfied inner life that contains the many bright stars of love and happiness. Okay? So, the Moon, Venus, and Rahu are all feminine, and they get involved in something because they want to feel something. They want to feel fulfilled. Moon and Venus will get involved with things that let us feel fulfilled nicely. Rahu will let us get involved with things, but the reason, the motivation is for fulfillment, because I need it, I want it. But it won't give the fulfillment because Rahu is one of the cruel planets that the amount of fulfillment you get is always less than the amount of work required to get that fulfillment, unfortunately. However, with the waxing moon and Venus being feminine planet, they represent things that we can get involved with because we have needs that we want to have fulfilled, inner needs, and they allow the amount of work to have those things is such that it's worth the inner fulfillment we get. So it's worth the work. So, but all Moon, Venus, and Rahu have the goal of fulfilling a need, being happy, being fulfilled. Whereas masculine Sun, Mars, and Jupiter have the need of doing something, building something, making a better life. They want to see a concrete result. They want to do something great. They have ambition and vision, and they want to create. Okay? So, they want to create for a reason. Sun creates because it's its inspiration to do that thing. Jupiter is a hyper-creative planet. Jupiter always sees the creative potential and wants to create. Mars, he's the planet that can always see a better way of doing something. He's like, he can always see a better way of how something can work better, and he tries to, make that better way happen. He goes, this should be this way, I'm going to make this happen. This would work better, I'm going to make it happen better. Mars is always wanting to fix things and improve things. But these are all very external. They do it because they want externally things to be better and more. Okay? Is why they do it. Whereas Moon, Venus, and Rahu, they do what they do because they want the inner to feel more satisfied and more fulfilled. Okay? Then Mercury, Saturn, and Ketu are neuters. And neuter grahas get involved for both of the purposes, meaning they get involved for both external success and internal fulfillment, for both reasons. That doesn't mean they're going to get that. For instance, Saturn's cruel. We know that what Saturn's going to get out of the work he puts into it is going to be minuscule. But he still gets into the work because he wants to do something to provide an external security, and he wants to psychologically feel good too. That's his motivation. So, but that doesn't mean he's automatically going to get the fulfillment. Okay? Again, that's another story because he's a cruel planet. The amount of work Saturn requires for anything is going to be less than our reward. That's just the nature of Saturn. But that doesn't mean Saturn's not motivated to seek fulfillment. He is. Okay? And Saturn, as does Mercury and Ketu, who are neuter, they get involved to both achieve something external and to fulfill something internal. Okay? So, Saturn is, I think, really one of the interesting one of those neuter planets, being the big cruel guy. But Saturn, he wants to create something external because he wants external security. He wants to feel safe and protected. He wants an external security. And he can see the worth of having external forms of security. But he also gets involved with things because he wants to be validated psychologically. Okay? He simply just wants to be validated psychologically. And that's his inner need. He has both needs. Mercury is, the skillful one, the curious one, the one who can always, find something to do with what's available. He'll play around with things and make something happen. So Mercury always wants to make something happen. He always wants to pull things together and make them happen. That's his external thing. Okay? But internally, has a need for sharing and communication and, to connect intellectually with things to feel intellectually fulfilled. Okay? So he has both the inner and outer. Ketu, is very interesting on all planets as a neuter. As a neuter internally, meaning the feminine half of that neuter, Ketu wants the inner fulfillment of peace and perfection and the feeling that everything's in order, just that feeling of peace. That's what Ketu is striving for internally. So it gets into things because it feels like getting into those things will give a sense of peace and inner security and quiet. Okay? Ketu gets into things externally as well. He's motivated to get into things externally because those external things give him are the arenas that he can find that peace. Okay, ultimately Ketu is an introverted planet. Okay, but he very much sees a need to create things externally, to do concrete external things, because until he does those things, he doesn't feel like he can let go of them. So Ketu does things that he needs to kind of finish and get finish the job, a job well done. Okay, and then he can have peace and not bother with it. But he needs to concretely fulfill external things. Okay, he needs to do something that has a concrete value. All the male planets, and therefore also the neuters to half a degree, need to always do something that has a concrete purpose. Okay, and not just a purpose of making them feel good. Okay. The male planets, Sun, Mars, and Jupiter, as I mentioned briefly, the Sun wants to, have a concrete representation of his inspiration. Okay? Mars always wants to fix things. That's what he does. And Jupiter, of course, is really creative and can always think of something that needs creating. So and these all need to be concrete things to feel right about. Jupiter wants to create concrete things. For instance, Jupiter represents children, that, desire to create concrete children, to leave something concrete behind is Jupiter. Okay? Then the Moon, Venus, and Rahu are feminine. Moon represents the things we do, the things we get involved with, because simply being involved with those makes us feel right, makes us feel comfortable. The Moon is seeking that comfort of, this is what I'm used to, this is what feels right to me, and it seeks that. Venus gets involved with things because it simply wants the fulfillment those things give, the internal fulfillment, and the love for those things, which is a healing love that helps regenerate and revigorate a person and makes everything worth doing. So Venus gets involved with things in order to have that inner feeling of, because I feel this way, this is worth doing. Okay, there are other things in my life are worth doing. That's why people, when they fall in love and they feel in love, everything else they have to do in their lives gets easier. It doesn't feel as much of a burden anymore, because they have that fulfillment, that inner fulfillment of love. So Venus gets involved with things basically for the inner fulfillment of love. Rahu, as I mentioned, gets involved with things because it wants to fulfill its unfathomable needs. It just feels like it needs it. It has a burning desire for that thing, and it feels that if that desire is fulfilled, its needs will be fulfilled. That's how Rahu works. And so it's very feminine, it's very need-centered. It wants to be fulfilled inwardly and emotionally. All these three planets do. So a person will deal with the things of a Rashi, the concrete things of a Rashi, very differently depending if masculine, feminine, or neuter planets are influencing it. Okay? The next important category are Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra grahas, which I cover in chapter 11. Okay? Venus and Jupiter are Brahmins, Sun and Mars are Kshatriyas, Moon and Mercury are the Vaishyas, Saturn's a Sudra, Ketu's a mixed caste, Rahu's an outcast. Okay? Brahmins gain greater understanding through the concrete experiences that they're involved with. So Brahmins, they get involved with the Rashi and they gain understanding about that Rashi. So if that Rashi is the Rashi of money, and they're both influencing it, you gain greater understanding about money if the Brahmin planets Jupiter and Venus are related to it. Jupiter and Venus always want to learn more about that Rashi and understand it more. Okay? And Venus, through its internal processes in relating to that Rashi, will come to understand so much more also about fulfillment. Okay? But the Brahmin Rashis, they gain, or planets, they're going to gain understanding through the concrete experiences that they influence. Kshatriyas are the Sun and Mars. Kshatriyas get stronger and use their will more appropriately through the concrete experience that they get involved with. So Kshatriyas are all about training, becoming stronger. And the Rashis that they're related to, those Rashis help a person get stronger because they're training and they're using their will more. And will is both will in commanding others, which is the Sun, will in action, which is Mars, and also will in non-action, which is also Mars. To hold yourself back, to restrain yourself, to hold your temper is also Mars. A bad Mars gets angry and throws a temper at things easily. A good Mars holds that temper back until the right time to act, and it acts logically and precisely and effectively. So the will to act logically, rightly, and precisely is Mars. So again, we get stronger with those things. As we grow, we get stronger. Moon and Mercury are the Vaishyas. And did I forget Vaishyas here? Okay, I didn't write Vaishyas down on your little manual I was putting together for you. I'll add that before I give it to you. Moon and Mercury are the Vaishyas. Vaishyas get involved with things because it helps them be who they are more. Okay? It helps them develop their personalities more along the lines of who they really are. It helps them develop their skills along the lines that they really are. So you're going to develop your personality and become more comfortable with your personality, and you're going to develop your skills more through the things that Mercury and Moon are involved with. So Mercury, for instance, represents your friends. Your friends are the people you do things with that are important to you. And so by getting involved with your friends, your skills are going to develop, right? Okay. But also by being with your friends, you become more secure and confident in the things that are important to you, because those things are getting validated through your friends. So any sign that's influenced by Mercury, we have a friendship with, which means that sign and the things it represents will let us develop our skills and feel good about who we are as an individual. Okay? The moon, of course, represents the ahamkara, the ego. It's our egocentric, individualized self. And so the moon naturally gets involved with those things that validate how it, oneself. That feels right and comfortable to ourselves. Okay? So the Vaishya planets basically get involved with things to become more of who they really are. Okay? And become better at who they are as individuals. Saturn's a Sudra. Sudra gets involved because they have to pay for their right for life, which means to pay their dues. To live, you have to pay your dues. And that's Saturn. Saturn gets us involved with the things that we have to take care of, that we have an obligation towards, in order to pay for all the other things we have in life. Saturn is the debt. It's what we have to pay for all the good things we have in our life. After all the good things we have in our life, we have a credit card debt. So say you go shopping for a month. At the end of the month, you have a credit card debt that you have to pay. That's what Saturn is. He's the one who has to work it off. He's the one that has to work off all the good things at the end of the day. Okay? He's the servant, right? He cleans up the mess. So he's the one who's cleaning up your mess. You get involved with things where Saturn is because you have a mess there that you have to clean up. And in cleaning up that mess, you are paying for all the things you got. Because really, it's not possible to walk through life without harming things, right? You can't live without harming things. You're going to have some debt just through living. Even if you live a very noble life, you're still going to cause some debt to accrue that you're going to have to work off. You're going to create a mess that you will have to clean. Okay? And that's what Saturn is. The sign that Saturn's involved with, we're getting involved with because we have to pay our dues and clean up our mess. So we really, instead of getting all upset and angry and going, oh my God, I hate this thing, and this thing's always a burden to me, and this person's a burden to me, whatever, we should just look at Saturn as, okay, I'm going to pay my dues. I'm going to act the most righteously with my best behavior with no expectations, and as soon as I pay my bills, this thing that's a problem, that's hard, will either go away and I'll get something better, or it will change into something that's less work. And that's how you have to approach the attitude with Saturn. You just have to realize you're paying off the debt to that thing, and you just need to pay it off with a good attitude, realizing once it's paid off, your life is going to get so much better. But until it's paid off, it won't get better. You know, it's just like, say you've got a huge credit card debt and you want to buy a house. And you've got $70,000 of credit card debt. Well, you have to just say, okay, I want the house, I want a better life, which is what the house symbolizes, so I have to pay off my debt. And you just pay off your debt until it's done. That's one option. When your debt is paid off, you'll get to buy a beautiful house. But let's say you decide, I'm not going to pay my debt off. Screw it. And you just don't pay your debt. What happens? Your credit gets bombed, your credit rating gets trashed, and you never can buy a house because no one will ever give you a loan. And so you never get the thing. That's what Saturn's like. Say it's influencing your spouse planet. That means you have a debt to pay that until you pay it off in full, you won't get the spouse that you can be happy with. So if you're in a relationship and you don't work your hardest to pay the debt off, and you instead shirk your debt, then you didn't pay your debt off, which means you're not going to get a better partner. But if you act the right way and you do exactly the right thing in that relationship, until either that person leaves voluntarily, even though you're finally doing the right thing and then they leave, that shows your debt is over and a new person will come that works with you. Or that person you're with will all of a sudden adapt and adjust into doing the right actions, and you'll have a good relationship with them after your debt's paid. That shift will happen. But if you don't make the effort to pay your debt off, you're never going to have the shift in your life that's going to allow you to get to that next level of fulfillment. So don't look at Saturn as a bad thing like this curse. It's just something you have to pay. To do, you have to pay. So that's where you need to act the most nobly and do the most right actions. Because in doing that, you're going to pay your debt off the fastest. Okay? K2 is mixed caste. Mixed caste get involved for all of the above reasons, with the Kshatriya reason being the dominant one, meaning to get stronger. Okay, K2 feels very vulnerable. One of the main reasons he gets involved with things is to feel stronger, both in his ability to do and internally stronger. Because he's a neuter planet. He's external and internal, right? Okay. And outcast Rahu gets involved for reasons that are not for the real reasons. And also for Shudra reasons. So he gets involved for reasons that are not the real reasons. So Rahu gets involved for this, and then what he gets is completely different from that. So he's the trickster. He's like Loki in Norse mythology. He tells you one thing, you get something else. So any sign that's influenced by Rahu, he's the outcast. You think what things are going to happen a certain way, but he's going to give you something else instead. So you're always going to get fooled and tricked with respect to the Rashi that Rahu's in. It's never going to happen the way you thought it should, or give you the hope, the fulfillment that you wanted, or the expectation you had. But it might give you something else good. It's possible. But it'll never give you what you thought it. The other reason Rahu gets involved for things is for Shudra reasons like Saturn. To pay your debts, to pay your dues. Rahu is like that. Rahu gives the results of Saturn. So the sign influenced by Rahu, just like Saturn, is a sign we have a debt to pay towards. We have to consciously work as good as we can towards paying that debt through proper behavior and proper action until either the thing that's causing us trouble changes and works, or until that thing leaves, allowing something else to come in. But if we shirk our debt, which means we go, I'm not going to do that, and we walk away from it without taking proper action, then we haven't paid the debt, and then the next thing that comes along is going to be just as bad. So the Shudras, Rahu and Saturn, Rahu's not a Shudra per se, but it has a Shudra quality. Rahu and Saturn represent the idea that until you get it right, you don't get what you want. So if you're in a bad situation, do it right. Because if you leave that bad situation doing it badly, you're not ready to move on to a good situation. And lots of people do that. People have a bad Rahu or a bad Saturn. The minute something gets a little difficult, they quit. They're like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then they go to another bad situation, another bad situation. They never go, okay, I'm going to do it right. Even though it sucks, I'm going to do it right. Like one person had a shitty job. Didn't like it much, and they didn't get paid as much as their old job. So they had a bad attitude, and they didn't try to come to work on time. So after a month, they got fired. So how's that going to help them get a new job? Well, a year later, they don't have a job. Okay? If they had said, okay, I'm not getting paid as much, and this place sucks to work, but I'm going to work right, and they put their effort into it, and they work hard and diligently, then either things will change in that job for things to really work with them, or another job opportunity will open up that they can slip into when that debt is paid off. But we can't shirk our debts. We can't get anywhere until we paid our dues. Okay, so that's how the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra grahas affect the signs. A Sudra grahas sort of make us a slave to that thing. So be a slave with a good attitude and win your freedom. Okay? Basically, Moon and Mercury help us see who we are more and appreciate ourselves more and get validated for ourselves more. Sun and Mars are to train our will and strength. Venus and Jupiter are to gain knowledge and wisdom and understanding. And Ketu for all the above reasons. The next group of planets are the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas grahas. I cover this in Graha Sutras chapter 12. This is a very, very important category. It's, really important. Sattva grahas are the Sun, Moon, and Jupiter. Rajas grahas are Mercury and Venus. Tamas grahas are Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu. So Sattva grahas get involved with the concrete experience of the Rashis because they're inspired to do so. So we're inspired to get involved with the things that the Sattva planets, Sun, Moon, and Jupiter get involved with. It means that we're always going to want those things. Things that we get involved out of inspiration, we get involved with because those things are truly who we are. And so we want to get involved with those things. And in being involved with those things, because it's who we are, we never get sick of them. Okay? If we get involved with something for any other reason, over time, we might not want it anymore. Okay? That's particularly true of the Tamas grahas. But the Sattva grahas, Sun, Moon, and Jupiter, we get involved because we're inspired, which means they're part of who we really are, and so we're always going to want that thing. It's always going to be interesting and important and good for us. Okay? Because it's true. It's true. Those things are truly who we are. Rajas grahas are Mercury and Venus, and those grahas get involved with the concrete experiences of the Rashis due to choosing the experience in the hope that the experiences will prove desirable. So it chooses them because those are desirable experiences. Okay? By desirable experiences means those experiences will help you feel good, they will nourish you, they will rebuild you, they will regenerate you, they will calm you, they will satisfy you, okay, in some way. Tamas grahas, which are Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, require that the concrete experience, and get involved with the concrete experiences because trouble requires them to do so. Okay? So you might be in a bad place, and as a result, to get out of that bad place, you do something. Right? You get involved with something because you're in a bad place. And you get involved with something to get you out of that bad place. But then as soon as you're out of that bad place, you don't want to be there. You don't want to be there anymore. Okay? They're like the medicine. When you're sick, you take the medicine, even though it's really bitter, to get better, right? But once you're better, you're not going to take the medicine anymore. After you're better, you're going to take the food that are ruled by Mercury and Venus, the Rajas planets, the food that you think will prove desirable. Okay? So, anytime we do anything to get us out of a problem, to get us away from a problem, to save us, to overcome a difficulty, That's a Tamas motivation. Anytime we do something to avoid suffering, it's a Tamas motivation. Okay, that's basically what Tamas is. If I do this, I'll remove myself from suffering. That's a Tamas motivation. That's an important motivation. If we're in a house and it's burning, leaving that house is a Tamas motivation. Meaning, if I don't leave this house, I will burn. I better leave. And that's important. So, these three planets, the Tamas planets, they get us involved with things because to help us get away from trouble, to get away from suffering. Okay? And that's the really interesting thing about Saturn and Rahu in particular. We've already learned that Saturn and Rahu represent where we have to pay our dues. So we get involved with things with Saturn and Rahu to pay our dues. Yet we also get involved with things from Saturn and Rahu so that we can get away from suffering. Why would I want to get away from suffering by going and paying my dues? Does that make sense? Well, it makes sense if you think about it deeply, in that until you pay your dues, you're going to suffer. So they get involved with things because they're suffering, and they pay their dues, and then things get better. So take health, for instance. Somebody's sick. So they get involved with eating healthy food. You know, they go on a diet, let's say. And they get involved so they don't die of some disease. And they have to eat that good food for a certain amount of time until their health is restored. At which point, they're no longer suffering. And that happens too. Say you're suffering loneliness. So if Saturn's influencing or Rahu's influencing something that represents like your relationship, you're going to get involved in your relationship to remove yourself from suffering. So you're going to get involved in a relationship because you're feeling the pain and suffering of loneliness. So you get involved to not be lonely. And then because Saturn and Rahu got involved, you got involved out of a painful reason, you're going to suffer there until you learn to work out your lonely issues. Okay? Which means until you learn to be a more centered individual, a healthier individual psychologically. And you're going to not do that just sitting around being lonely. You're going to do that getting involved in relationships and suffering and getting hurt and working through your issues. So we get involved with things with Saturn and Rahu to eventually overcome suffering. But the things we get ourselves involved into are going to be really hard and demanding and make us feel worse than we did before. But by going through that worse, it helps us overcome the suffering that got us involved there in the first place. Okay? It's kind of like they say, the cure hurts more than the disease, right? It's like that so often. So you got heart disease, but it really doesn't really hurt you. And now you're going to go get chopped open, sewn back up, have your rib cage sawed through, and your heart worked on, and you're going to be in immense pain for weeks afterwards. It's going to take you a long time to get back on your feet, but you still do it anyway. Okay? Because once you heal from that surgery, you're going to live 10 more years versus dying tomorrow. Okay? That's what the Tamas plants are like. The medicine, the cure, always hurts more than the disease. But by going through the cure, you overcome the disease, and then you have a healthy state. That's exactly how Saturn and Rahu work. So they'll get you involved with things that are going to drive you crazy and cause you pain and suffering, but which are going to cure you of your basic disease, which is basically the disease of your psychological lack, which those two planets represent. But the only way to get cured of that disease is to get involved with the things and suffer through the things that they represent. So the suffering we have with the things that Saturn and Rahu involves us with, that's the medicine that cures us of that disease that just chinks away at us all our lives. We gotta embrace it, embrace the disease, take the medicine, suffer, and purge the poisons out, get rid of the disease. And that's what Saturn and Rahu do to us. Okay? So those are Tamas. But once the disease is healthy, we no longer want it. Once we're healthy, we no longer want it. So let's say Saturn and Rahu is influencing the relationship stuff. We get involved in relationships because we're suffering loneliness and feelings of isolation. We don't fulfill a natural abundance of love, which is all around us. So instead, we're suffering that lack of abundance of love. So we get involved with someone to get love from them. which never works. And as a result, we suffer acutely. But through that acute, painful suffering that makes us want to shoot ourselves, we realize that there's an abundance of love that we can tap into that begins with our inner selves. Then we start fulfilling that inner self. And then at that point, we're healthier than when we started. And indeed, that painful relationship has cured us of that plaguing loneliness and feelings of isolation that we always had. And we become healthier psychologically. At that point, the person we're with shifts and we have a healthier relationship with them, or they go away and something else comes in. So Saturn and Rahu, because they're Tamas planets, and they only get us involved with things in order to heal us of problems, and they also are Sudra planets that get involved with things to help us pay our debts off, that's why the things they influence usually don't last forever. It's not because they're cruel planets so much, it's because of their fact that they're Tamas. And Tamas we only keep as long as we need it to help us get away from something bad for us. It's the Sattvic planets, the Sun, Moon, and Jupiter, that get us involved with things because it's natural to who we are and our way of being. Now, once we have those things, we always want to have those things. Okay? And Rajas, Grahas, Mercury, and Venus get us involved with things because the experiences are desirable, and them being desirable, of course, we'll want to stay there. Okay? So the main reason that Saturn and Rahu have such, and even Ketu have such problematical reputations of destroying everything is not because they're cruel. It's because they only get involved in things as long as you need the cure. Once you don't need the cure, they get rid of that thing in your life. Okay? And that's why things don't last with Saturn and Rahu. Ketu also represents a Tamas planet. So sometimes we're held back from achieving something due to some problem, something we have to resolve and complete. And that's what Ketu represents. Ketu represents when we have to go back and finish something before we can move forward. So the things we get involved with due to Ketu are the things we have to finish before we can move forward. So it's kind of like getting away from that thing that's holding us back. That's what Ketu gets us involved with. Getting held back is a bad thing. To escape that pull, backwards pull, we get involved with the Ketu things. Once we're involved with those and work through them, then the thing that's holding our back is gone and we move forward. But then we won't need those things that we work through either. Okay? The difference is Ketu is a mixed cast. So he gets involved with things out of many more reasons than just to pay off debts. Okay, which he does do to some degree. But mostly he gets involved with things to become a better person, basically. To develop more knowledge of Venus and Jupiter as Brahmins, more knowledge as a Brahmin, more will of a Kshatriya, more self-ability as a Vaishya, and by paying its debts off as a Sudra. Okay? Gets involved for all those reasons. So he becomes a better, more well-rounded person by getting involved with things. But he has to get involved with things to overcome the things that are holding him back. Okay? Which is basically what's holding back is being imbalanced in some behaviors. And getting involved with those things that Ketu is influencing helps a person balance those behaviors so they're not held back by them. Because basically we have limiting behaviors that hold us back. And that's what Ketu represents. By getting involved with the things of Ketu, we overcome those limiting behaviors, we balance them, and now the thing that was holding us back is gone. But then we don't need to be involved with those things of Ketu anymore, because, again, Ketu only stays involved with things as long as there's a problem. So, like Saturn. Saturn keeps you in a relationship where you feel unloved only as long as you believe you're unlovable. As soon as you start realizing you're lovable and loving, your relationship changes to be that. So Saturn can't keep you involved with something unless you're sick. Same with Rahu and Ketu. The Tamas Grahas only keep you involved with something as long as there's something you still need to work out. Once you overcome that problem, you won't be involved with it anymore. And that's the real reason those planets are considered the big malefics that remove things. It's not because they're malefics, because they're Thomas. But you need Thomas. Thomas is not a bad thing. When you're sick, you have to do whatever it takes to get well. But once you're well, you don't need to do whatever it took to get well. That's all Thomas planets are doing. Okay, next, and that's really one of the most important categorizations. The next category is luminous, starry, and dark grahas. This is covered in detail in Graha Sutras, chapter 23. So the sun and moon are luminous planets, meaning they give light. They're light. Mars, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn are starry planets, which means they look like stars in the heavens. And Rahu and Ketu are dark, which means you don't even see Rahu and Ketu. Okay? The luminous grahas, through their concrete experiences, allow the individual to find out about who they really are and what they really need. So you find your true self by getting involved with the things of the sun and moon. They're the ones that give illumination upon your life and who you are. The starry grahas allow the individual to find out what their skills and capabilities really are. How skillful really are you? And how much can your skill get improved? That's what the starry grahas represent. Because the sun and moon are the king and queen that rule the kingdom. But then the other 5 planets, the starry planets, they're the ones doing everything in the kingdom. So the king says to Mars, go do this. King says to Mercury, go do this. King says to Jupiter, go do this. So the efficiency of the kingdom depends a lot on the ability of those 5 starry planets. The vision of the kingdom comes from the sun and moon, the king and queen. But the efficiency and the ability of the kingdom is going to come from the people in the kingdom, the starry planets, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. So that symbolizes a person using those skillful planets, and that helps them see what they are really good at, what they really can do, what they're bad at, and so on. And to develop those skills through practice. So we can say we get involved with the starry planets to develop more skills, to become more practiced in actually doing things. Okay? Rahu and Ketu are dark, and the dark grahas allow the individual to find out about their dark side, which means it lets the person find out about the parts of themselves they weren't even aware of. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I was that way. And Rahu and Ketu both do that. Rahu brings out her dark side in real obvious ways, where all of a sudden we find ourselves behaving like a monster. But Ketu has a subtle dark side. Ketu thinks he's all perfect, but then he has some huge deficits that he swept under the rug. And so the things that we've kind of swept under the rug, those are the Ketu things that we're shocked about. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm that way. Or I can't believe how restrictive and limited I am. But we find out about the dark side, the parts of ourselves that we're hiding from ourselves, is what we find in Rahu and Ketu. Ketu hides things because we're so focused on being a certain way that we hide the opposite. And we say, oh, that's not even part of my reality because I'm like this. We have our back turned on them. And then one day Ketu forces us to look around and we see there's this whole pile of junk behind us that we've collected. Because we thought we were a certain way when we were really all those ways. It's just we swept them under the rug. And then one day we realize it. Rahu shows us our dark side. Basically by getting involved in the situations that are the most painful to us, that cause us to react in the worst possible way we could ever react. And we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm that kind of person. Like people always say, oh, I would never do that. But Rahu is the planet that gets you in the situation that you do indeed do just that thing that you would never do. Okay? So Rahu is full of surprises that way. Next important category we've got are the forms of the grahas. And that I cover in a little detail in Graha Sutras, chapter 24. Sun and Mercury have the form of a bird. So they're birds. Moon has a creeping form, like a snake or an insect. It creeps along the ground. Jupiter and Venus are bipeds, so they're humans. Saturn and Mars are quadrupeds, which means they have 4 legs. Birds search and find what works for them. So whenever you see a Rashi influenced by the Sun or Mercury, the birds, the Sun and Mercury are trying to see if is this going to work for me? Will this work for me? Sun searches for his kingdom. He's like, is this the place I'm supposed to be in life? This is my kingdom. Is this where I need to work and rule and build? Mercury searches for the best possible situation. Mercury's the curious one that flies all over and goes, will this work? Will this work? Will this work? So always searching and trying different things wherever we see the Sun and Mercury. Mercury is just searching all the potentials until he finds the potential that he's going to say, yeah, this is the right one, and he's going to run with it. The Sun is looking for the kingdom where he can anchor his life and build his life around. Okay? They're both searching. Creeping forms do whatever it takes to survive and get their needs met. So that's what the Moon does. The signs involved that the Moon's influenced by, we will do anything it takes to survive there, to make things work there, to get our needs met there. And that may mean groveling on the ground sometimes. It's where we're just going to do whatever it takes to get our needs met, where we find that creeping form. And that requires evolving. Okay, and that's another important thing about creeping things. All the creeping things are lowly evolved animals, right? So lizards and snakes and insects, they're like low on the life food chain. They're like, or on the evolutionary ladder, they're very low life forms. Okay? But out of all the life forms on Earth, they're the most adaptable and ready to survive. So if we have like a nuclear holocaust, all the mammals on Earth may disappear, and the birds too, the higher life forms. But what's going to be left, even if there's a complete nuclear holocaust, there's going to be insects that somehow survive. You know, it's just going to happen. Like cockroaches have been around since the days of the dinosaurs, right? Crocodiles have very little change since, you know, the days of the dinosaur. They're just smaller now, basically. But they haven't changed much in millions and millions and millions of years. So these creepy things have the ability to adapt and evolve and just adjust in order to make things work and to keep on going. And the Moon is that planet that represents adaptation. So Darwin's whole idea of our adaptation, whether it's a true theory or false theory, that whole idea of adapting to survive and adapting to exist and adapting to find happiness is the Moon. And the insects, the creepy crawlies, they all represent that quality compared to other life forms, which don't quite have that ready ability, okay, to survive and quickly adapt. So insects will adapt quicker to changes on this planet to survive than humans will, okay? So there will always be insects, more insects than humans, because they always will adapt to whatever the situations are more readily. So that's what the Moon does. When the Moon's in bad shape, a person literally can become a groveling person, you know, where they just have no pride, no self-respect to get their needs met. Okay, that's the that's the kind of what you can see in people when the Moon's in really bad shape. But this creeping form is not a bad quality at all. It's just saying that they're adaptable, they'll do what they need to survive and get their needs met in respect to that thing. Okay? Biped grahas, human grahas, which were, what were the human grahas here? I can't remember, I'm so tired today. Okay, Jupiter and Venus, of course. Jupiter and Venus are the bipeds. So those two biped signs, they just stand up erect. The unique thing about humans, biped signs, is that humans can cover more ground in a day than any other land form. So a human can go 100 miles a day, no problem if he's fit. There's no animal that can do that. No land-dwelling animal that can cover 100 miles a day and not be half dead at the end of the day. A horse can't do it. Nothing can. Humans are the longest distance travelers on Earth. Okay? That, you know, land-dwelling. Birds, of course, can go further because they fly. But amongst land-dwelling things, humans can go the longest. Now, of course, we're not used to that because we're all fat and lazy and untrained. But a trained human, no problem, 100 miles a day. But But an untrained human just can't do it. So we don't want to compare the fact that at best most humans might manage 20 miles and want to die at the end of the day compared to a horse that can manage 50. If you get a horse that's lived in a stable all of its life and never ran, it's not going to be able to do 50 either. So you have to compare yourselves as an in-shape human to an in-shape animal. Okay? But amongst that, humans have the longest capacity for distance. They're slow, they're the slowest, but the longest capacity for distance. They're the weakest. They can carry the less weight per body. Based on our body weight, we're the weakest species out there. An ant can carry like 13 times his weight. A horse can carry a couple hundred pounds. We can carry a couple dozen pounds maybe, a few dozen pounds before we crumple. So we're very weak, but our strength is endurance. And that's the biped thing. Biped Rashis progress with their heads up and move forward. They have the longest vision of moving forward. So the biped Rashis get involved with things with a long-term plan, with the endurance for long-term investment. So those are Jupiter and Venus, right? So Venus will get involved with things, and it'll have the endurance, the negotiating ability, the harmonizing ability, the ability to improve things along the way, that lets Venus go there long term. Same with Jupiter. Jupiter lets things go there long term. Jupiter gives the forgiveness, the creativity, the goodwill, that lets us keep something in our lives long term. So these biped signs, they move forward over a long term period. These biped planets. So the signs they influence, we're going to be able to move forward to over a long duration of time and go a long distance with those things, basically. And we're going to be focused on the progress. So it's an investment of time that results in progress and more success and fulfillment. That's how the biped Rashis move forward. That's how humans are, right? Okay, I'm going to go through school for this many years. I'm going to get my internship. I'm going to get my job. And 20 years down the later, I'm going to have a wonderful career in 20 years. So that long-term planning, that's Jupiter and Venus. And the things we get involved in where we have long-term planning and where we can maintain our long-term goals, those are the Rashis influenced by Jupiter and Venus. Okay? So that's an extremely important quality for helping things go well. Quadruped grahas have the strength to deal with extremes. The quadrupeds are Saturn and Mars. Saturn's out of carrying great burdens. Saturn's like the ant who can carry 13 or whatever, how many times his body weight. I think it's 30 sometimes his body weight, something insane. Saturn can carry these great burdens, just like a quadruped, a four-legged animal, can carry huge burdens. Okay? Or they have a lot of strength to deal with critical, immediate things, like cheetahs. A cheetah can go super fast for a short time. Why? Because he has 4 legs. No two-legged creature can travel as fast and get up to speed as quickly as a 4-legged creature. Okay? Other than birds who are capable of flight, of course. Okay? Or, like an antelope who's running away from the cheetah, he's also a 4-legged animal that can bound away really quickly. Those actions are Mars. So, the signs that are influenced by Saturn, we have the strength to hang in there and carry great burdens. Basically, the beast of burden quadruped. Okay? And then the Rashi influenced by Mars, those are the Rashis we can deal with. Intense, immediate experiences. Okay? But again, those type of experiences over time will wear us out. So humans used to run down antelope and deer. They used to run them down on their bare feet and kill them with their bare hands at the end of that. The reason they do it, because they would run after a deer, they'd scare the deer would sprint away and stop. They would catch up and keep chasing it. The deer would run away. But the deer didn't ever recover from that little quick burst of running. So after like 6 miles, the deer is so tired and its body is so overheated because the way its cooling system worked, that it would fall over. And the humans could just go eat it right then and there. They could just really run a deer into the ground. This through maintaining the distance and the consistency. So, the same way that Mars influencing the sign means we'll deal with an immediate, dangerous, threatening experience. But we can't keep doing that over and over and over again. Just like the antelope will eventually fall apart. Just like the cheetah will eventually overheat and crap out. If we wanted to, and we could run down a cheetah, you know, if we could keep it in sight and know where it's going, we could run it down or track it. In 100 miles, that cheetah will be before the end of the day, before a human's gone 50 miles, that other animal will have passed out from heat exhaustion and from heat stroke, basically, because of the way their cooling systems work. They just can't do it. And the same in our lives. The quadruped grahas influencing a Rashi means that we might be capable of having some amazing, difficult burdens and doing some amazing, intense work there. But to keep it up will eventually cause us to crumble. The same way that quadrupeds can't go the distance. Okay? They're there for short, immediate, this needs to be done type stuff. The bipeds, Venus and Jupiter, they can go the distance. Okay? The sun is looking for his kingdom. He's a bird. Birds can do anything too. They can cover anything and go anywhere and roost anywhere. Mercury also can always find the best way to make something work. He's always searching for the best way. Those planets can keep things going too. Not as much as Venus and Jupiter, but more so than the quadrupeds, which are really only good for the short term, for the immediacies. Okay? And of course, just real simply speaking, quadrupeds don't have a very long lifespan, do they? Humans have a longer lifespan than four-legged creatures. Okay? So you see, a lot of these qualities we attribute to Saturn, Mars, and Rahu for causing problems aren't so much that they're cruel planets. It's because of some of these other categorizations. And each of these categories is really important. Then we've got the sites of the planets. I cover this in Graha Sutras, chapter 27. Sun and Mars look up. Mercury and Venus look sideways. Saturn and Rahu look down. Moon and Jupiter look kind of everywhere equally. Ketu has no eyes, so he doesn't look or see anything. Okay? So, a planet is going to look at a Rashi that it's influencing in that direction. So Sun and Mars are going to look up at a Rashi. And they're going to see that Rashi as an ambition to work towards, as a great thing worth going for, worth putting energy into. They strive for the best outcome. They look up towards the possible great possibilities. And they envision things. And they can see the best possible thing for that Rashi. Okay? Sideways grahas, which are Mercury and Venus, they move towards the obvious things. Yeah, this makes sense. This is the obviously right thing to do. They don't have that vision of the Sun and Mars. They're more in the now and making the obvious choices. I'm driving down the road and I can go left or right. Which ways I'm going to go. That's how Mercury and Venus are going. Whereas Mars and Rahu, they're looking towards this bigger vision and looking up towards the best thing. Venus and Mercury and Venus are sideways planets. They're just saying, well, the best option is this way. That's what I'll take. They're not looking for heaven. They're just looking for the best option. And a good Mercury and Venus are like that. A bad Mercury and Venus, of course, aren't like that because they're not working properly. But Mercury and Venus help us get down the road because we always take the best possible option. We just take the obvious left or right turn, basically. So they look sideways. And a lot of life, and a lot of success in life, is just about finding the best option. And say, oh, here I am in my life, I'm going to go left. This is the best option for today. And through that we progress. Sometimes people get so stuck in, oh, having this vision, this is the great thing I can do, that they don't pay attention to the fact they're only going to get there one turn at a time. And that's where Mercury and Venus come in. You might have the great vision given by Sun and Mars, that something better can be done with Mars, or just your vision of inspiration due to the Sun. How you're going to get there, though, is one turn at a time, which is Mercury and Venus. Okay? So if you have a great vision, you can't just step into that vision. You have to get your Mercury and Venus out and say, well, I can start approaching that vision by enrolling at my community college. Or I can start approaching that vision by buying this astrology book. That's your first term. You're not just going to be a surgeon tomorrow, right? Even if that's your vision. So Venus, Mercury and Venus, they help us progress with things because we are conscious of taking the turns, doing what we need to do to get to that, to achieve that goal. Okay? Downlooking grahas, which are Saturn and Rahu, bring about the negative possibilities that they dwell upon in respect to the concrete things indicated by the Rashis they influence. So basically, Saturn and Rahu don't really see what's right in front of them. Okay? Saturn and Rahu, they can be in a partnership with somebody who loves them, and they're looking down. They don't even see that person who loves them. And they're saying, I don't feel loved. This happens all the time in marriage, right? I don't feel loved because they're looking down. They're looking at their misery. They're looking at their negative psychology. So that's what they see. So someone over here saying, I love you. They don't see that person. The person over here who says, I never want to talk to you, they see that person. But they don't because that person's not there. So what they really see is what they're looking down on. Their negative ideas about themselves, their negative self-image. Nobody loves me, that's all they see, even though they have somebody loving them right here. So that's how Saturn and Rahu operate. That's why we have so much misery with them, because where Saturn and Rahu are, what we see is what is based on our psychological lacks, not really what's happening right in front of us. Okay? So down-looking grahas, when they influence a sign, that means we're not going to really see the sign that's really right in front of us. We're not going to see that thing in all its glory. Instead, we're going to see what we don't have. Okay? Moon and Jupiter look everywhere equally. Grahas that look everywhere equally do all of the above. That's the best thing. Looking at everything properly. Seeing the limitations of the thing, which is the down-looking. Seeing the wonderful, most wonderful aspects of it, which is the upward-looking. And seeing the sideways, which is what's the next best step with this thing. Moon and Jupiter do that. So, they give well-rounded fulfillment and joy and peace with the things they look at. Because we're looking at everything fully. Saturn and Rahu don't see the good. They just see the negative. And there'll be a negative, but that's all they'll see. And they won't see the rest of the good stuff. Moon and Jupiter, they see everything. They'll see the negative. But they'll also see all the good stuff. And they'll realize how much the good stuff outweighs the negative. And so they'll be at peace with it. And they'll make a good judgment. Yeah, this has its problems, but it has all these good things. It's way worth the problems. Where Saturn and Rahu, they just see the problems. It's not worth it. It sucks. I'm unhappy. Okay? Then the next category we've got are dry, wet, and moist grahas. And I cover this in Graha Sutras, chapter 28. Sun, Saturn, and Mars are dry. Moon and Venus are wet. Mercury and Jupiter are moist. Dry grahas do not comfort or soothe. They take things as they are and expect others to do likewise. So they're dry. They can be blunt. They can be as it is. There's no comfort, just the way it is. Boom. Jaimini Sutras is a very dry astrology. It is or it isn't. That's the sun, right? It's a sun system based on the sun signs and Rasi Dasas. Meaning based on the signs of the zodiac, which are signs, based on the sun. So they don't comfort or soothe. So the signs influenced by the sun, Saturn, Mars are not going to be where you're going to experience comfort and soothing. Things are going to be dry, and what you're going to get there is going to come in a dry way. It's going to come as it is. Not watered down, not diluted, not lubed up, not lotioned. Just the way it is. Moon and Venus are wet. Wet grahas comfort and soothe and try to make things feel better than it really is. They're going to try to make things feel good. So Sun and Moon say, here's your medicine, but it's cherry flavored. You're going to love it. Okay? Whereas Saturn, Mars, and Sun go, here's your medicine, and you drink it, it's like, oh. You almost want to die from the medicine, it's so bad. But Sun and Mercury and Moon and Venus, the wet planet, they soften everything up. They soothe everything. So the signs influenced by those wet planets, you're going to experience in a more soothing way. Okay? There's going to be more soothing there, more comfort. The things that happen are going to happen as comfortably as possible in that situation. Okay? Mercury and Jupiter are moist. Moist grahas are in between the two. They're not going to make as much effort to comfort things as, Mercury and Jupiter are going to. As Moon and Venus are going to. But they're not going to be dry either like these other planets. It's kind of like, to compare Venus to Mercury. Mercury is when you have a friend over for dinner. You offer him some water, you chit-chat and you talk, and you have a nice time, you give him some food. When Venus comes over, when someone you love comes over, or you have your first date with someone and you cook them dinner at your house, you're going to get out candles, you're going to clean the whole house, you're going to get out candles, you're going to put a nice tablecloth on, you're going to get out the good dishes, you're going to cook an amazing meal, you're going to have dessert for sure, that you probably cooked that morning or something. You're going to do everything to make that experience as comfortable and lovely as possible. That's how Mercury and Jupiter, that's how Moon and Venus are going to be. Mercury and Jupiter is going to be like friendly. You're not going to clean the house, but it's not going to be disgusting either. Saturn, Mars, and Sun, when they come to your house, it's like they're going to come to your house. You look, I'm sorry, I have to go. I have a mission to accomplish. Mars, there was just an accident on the freeway. I got called in. I got to go by. And you're just going to go. You're not going to spend time and say, oh yeah, come in for some tea. And after tea, you say, well, I've spent 20 minutes with you and now I have to go stop this fire that broke out half an hour ago. You're not going to do that with Sun, Mars, and Saturn. With Sun, Mars, and Saturn, it's like, hey, there's something needs taken care of. I don't have time for the comforts of life. Those can wait for when things are comfortable. Right now, there's something that needs to be dealt with, and so they deal with it. And so they're dry. People with stronger suns, stronger Mars, and stronger Saturn are going to be more dry and abrupt. People with nice moons and Venuses, they're going to spend lots of time making everyone feel comfortable and all that good stuff. Mercury and Jupiter are going to be moist and in between. So those are, I believe, the 8 categories of planets that we talk about in the old text. And those categories, those qualities of those planets, will color the Rashis. So you want to do now is get a little table, and there's actually one in your manual here, of all the planets. And then look at them in a mix. So Sun is dry, and he's cruel, and he's sattvic, and he's a bird. And then you'll see exactly what the Sun is going to do to a Rashi in its entirety. And try to do that for every planet, and keep a table handy as you look at charts with those categories, so you can learn to see how each planet in a very different way affects every Rashi. So yeah, Sun, Saturn, Mars, and Rahu are all cruel planets. But Sun and Mars are Kshatriyas, Mars is Tamasic, Sun is Sattvic. They're going to influence a sign differently overall because of all those other qualities. And you have to look at all these 8 qualities to see how a planet's going to affect the sign. Okay? We also have a category called manifesting and separating grahas, which I'm going to get into later, probably in the next video. And that deals with Jaimini's second source of strength. But for now, work with these 8 categories and try to understand what the planets are actually doing based on their natures. And their natures is not just gentle and cruel, benefic and malefic. Their natures are these 8 categories, primarily. Okay? And then the manifesting and separating planets, which we'll talk about later. Okay? But these are the categories, the qualities that make the planets do what they're going to do to a sign. And while Mars does something different to a sign than Rahu, than the Sun, because even though they're all cruel planets, they're different in their other categories. And that's an important thing to know the planet holistically instead of just from one dimension. Okay, thank you.